Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time, not to the thunder of hooves or the clash of swords, but to the gentle clinking of tiny spoons and the rich aroma of something truly transformative. Imagine this. You're a quiet observer in a bustling Ottoman coffee house, the air thick with the scent of freshly roasted beans, the murmur of hushed conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter. Around you, men with magnificent moustaches and flowing robes cradle delicate cups, their fingers dancing over the tiny handles, their eyes sharp, yet strangely serene. You probably won't survive this level of quiet intensity and meticulous detail, but we'll try our best to guide you through it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always cool to see where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our story begins, as many good stories do, with an accidental discovery, though for coffee, the exact eureka moment is, well, a bit brewed in mystery. What we do know is that by the 16th century, coffee, or kave as it was known, had firmly arrived in the Ottoman Empire, carried from the highlands of Yemen and Ethiopia. This wasn't just a new beverage, it was a societal earthquake in a cup. Before coffee, the social scene in the Ottoman world, particularly in its sprawling capital of Istanbul, revolved largely around mosques, markets, and bathhouses. People gathered, yes, but there wasn't a dedicated secular space purely for leisure and conversation, quite like what coffee would usher in. The mainstream historical fact here is undeniable. The first coffee houses emerged in Istanbul around the 1550s, fundamentally reshaping public life. Think about it. Suddenly, there's a place where you can sit for hours, discuss politics, philosophy, or the latest gossip, all while sipping a stimulating, non-alcoholic drink. This was revolutionary. It offered an alternative to the taverns, which were often viewed with suspicion, and the mosques, which had a distinct religious purpose. This new social lubricant quickly became indispensable. Historians still argue whether the initial spread was primarily through Sufi dervishes using it to stay awake during long nights of prayer, or if merchants were the primary vectors. But either way, coffee's invigorating properties were quickly recognized. It's a bit like when you discover that triple shot espresso on a Monday morning, pure, unadulterated productivity, or at least the illusion of it. The quirkier tidbit here is that early coffee preparation involved boiling the beans whole or only lightly roasted, often with spices, creating a much thicker, almost soupy concoction compared to the refined brew we know today. Imagine trying to get a spoon through that. This initial, rather rustic approach highlights how much the art of coffee making, and subsequently its etiquette, would evolve. The sheer novelty of it, though, was enough. People were captivated. The aroma alone, a dark, rich scent that promised wakefulness and warmth, drew them in. It seeped into the very fabric of Ottoman daily life, from the Sultan's palace to the humblest stall in the Grand Bazaar, laying the groundwork for an intricate dance of cups, saucers, and yes, those very particular spoons. You could almost say it became the original social media of its day, facilitating connections and disseminating information one cup at a time. And with something so potent and popular, rules, of course, had to follow. As coffee percolated through Ottoman society, it found fertile ground among an unexpected group, the Sufi mystics. Before the general populace embraced it, Coffee was quietly brewing in the secluded lodges of dervishes, those spiritual seekers dedicated to intense devotion and long nights of prayer. Imagine you're one of them, deep in meditation, the world outside fading into the whispers of the night. Sleep is a constant adversary, a heavy cloak threatening to pull you away from your spiritual journey. Then, a steaming cup is offered, its dark liquid promising wakefulness, focus, and a gentle lift that feels almost divine. The mainstream historical fact here is that Sufis were among the earliest and most enthusiastic adopters of coffee in the Ottoman lands, using it as a practical aid for their dhikr, remembrance of God, rituals which often stretched from dusk till dawn. They found that coffee helped them maintain alertness during their arduous spiritual exercises, allowing them to remain immersed in contemplation and recitation without succumbing to fatigue. It wasn't about a casual morning pick-me-up. It was a tool for transcendence, a key to unlocking deeper states of awareness. This gave coffee a certain mystique, a spiritual aura that set it apart from mere sustenance. It was more than a drink, it was an elixir for the soul. The quirkier tidbit is that some Sufi orders even developed specific chants and prayers to be recited while preparing or consuming coffee, elevating the act itself into a spiritual practice. Picture a dervish, eyes closed, whispering invocations over a bubbling pot, the rising steam carrying not just the aroma of coffee, but also the echoes of ancient prayers. This imbues the whole ritual with a profound sense of purpose, far beyond simply satisfying a craving. It's almost like they were performing a sacred alchemy, transforming simple beans and water into a conduit for divine connection. You can almost feel the serene energy radiating from these early coffee rituals, a stark contrast to the bustling coffee houses that would soon follow. However, historians still argue whether this Sufi adoption was the primary catalyst for coffee's widespread social acceptance, or if it remained a niche use until merchants truly commercialized it. Was it the spiritual allure that drew people in, or the sheer undeniable kick? It's a bit like wondering if people started meditating because of mindfulness apps, or if mindfulness apps just tapped into an existing desire for calm. Either way, the Sufi connection lent coffee an air of respectability, even sanctity, that surely helped it overcome initial skepticism from more conservative elements of society. This early association with spiritual discipline also meant that the act of drinking coffee often came with an inherent quietude and introspection. It wasn't a boisterous activity, it was a contemplative one. You didn't just gulp it down, you savoured it, felt its warmth spread through you, and allowed its stimulating properties to sharpen your mind. This laid the subtle groundwork for the intricate etiquette that would later define Ottoman coffee culture. When something is treated with such reverence, even its accessories like the cup, the serving tray, and eventually the humble spoon begin to acquire symbolic weight. It's a slow, almost imperceptible shift from utility to ritual, preparing the stage for the dramatic entrance of those 14 spoon rules. Just as a monk's robes are more than just clothing, the coffee implements would become more than just tools. With coffee's invigorating properties recognized and its spiritual associations established, it was only a matter of time before it spilled out of the Sufi lodges and into the wider public sphere. And when it did, it didn't just spill. It burst forth, creating entirely new social institutions that would profoundly reshape urban life. The coffee houses. Imagine you're walking through the narrow, winding streets of 16th century Istanbul. The air, usually filled with the cries of hawkers and the scent of spices, now carries a new, enticing aroma, dark, roasted, and utterly captivating. You follow it, drawn by an invisible thread, until you find yourself before an open doorway, light and warmth spilling out. Inside, a scene unlike any other unfolds. The mainstream historical fact is that the first public coffee houses, or kahvehaneler, opened in Istanbul in the mid-16th century, specifically around 1554–1555. These weren't just places to grab a quick drink. They were vibrant, bustling hubs of activity, quickly becoming indispensable to city life. Before their advent, public social interaction was often limited to religious spaces or the marketplaces, which, while lively, didn't offer the same relaxed, discursive environment. The coffeehouse changed all that. Suddenly, there was a dedicated secular space where menand, it was predominantly men in the early days, could gather, away from the watchful eyes of family and the demands of work. It was a place for leisure, for debate, for gossip, and for the sheer pleasure of company. The quirkier tidbit is that these early coffee houses were often quite simple in their decor, perhaps just a few low stools or cushions around small tables, but their real allure lay in the atmosphere. They became centres for storytelling, poetry recitation, and even shadow puppet theatre, karagöz, providing entertainment long before the advent of radio or television. You might walk in and find a group intently listening to a storyteller spin a tale of ancient heroes, or overhear a heated debate about the latest political machinations. It was the original third place-no home, not work, but a vital community hub where ideas, news, and even dissent could simmer and spread. It's almost like a very low-tech, highly caffeinated version of today's social media feeds, except you actually had to be in the same room as everyone else. Historians still argue whether the rapid proliferation of coffee houses was due to a pre-existing social vacuum they filled, or if their very existence created a new demand for such spaces. Did people long for a public living room, or did the coffee house teach them they needed one? Either way, their success was undeniable. They multiplied across Istanbul and then throughout the empire, becoming fixtures in every major town. This rapid expansion, however, also brought challenges, leading to initial resistance and even outright bans, which we'll delve into shortly. But for now, focus on the sheer novelty and excitement. Imagine the thrill of this new public forum, where you could rub shoulders with merchants, scholars, artisans, and even off-duty janissaries. Conversations flowed as freely as the coffee, sparking new ideas and forging unexpected connections. This communal consumption of a stimulating beverage naturally led to the development of shared customs. How do you serve it? How do you drink it? How do you signal your needs and desires without interrupting the flow of conversation? These unspoken questions, repeated countless times across thousands of coffee houses, slowly but surely began to solidify into a complex code of etiquette, a social grammar that would eventually, subtly, incorporate the precise placement of a small, shiny spoon. The meteoric rise of the coffee house, while celebrated by many, was not without its shadows. Imagine you're a conservative religious scholar in 16th century Istanbul, steeped in tradition and wary of novelties. You see these new establishments, filled with idle men, discussing worldly matters, perhaps gambling, certainly not praying. The intoxicating aroma, while pleasant to some, might seem suspicious to you. What is this dark liquid that stirs the mind but is not wine? This novelty, this sudden explosion of public leisure, naturally attracted scrutiny and, in many cases, outright opposition. The mainstream historical fact here is that coffee and coffee houses faced significant religious and political opposition and even bans in the Ottoman Empire throughout the 16th and 17th centuries. This wasn't just a fleeting disapproval, it was a recurring struggle. Religious authorities often deemed coffee to be haram, forbidden, because of its stimulating effects, comparing it to wine, which was explicitly prohibited by Islam. They argued it led to intoxication and idleness, distracting people from their religious duties and encouraging sinful behavior. Political leaders, on the other hand, viewed coffee houses with suspicion as potential hotbeds of dissent and sedition. Imagine a place where people could freely gather, discuss current events, and perhaps even criticize the government. A nightmare for any authoritarian regime. The quirkier tidbit about these bans is how they were enforced, and often how comically they failed. Sometimes the Grand Vizier would order all coffee houses closed, their contents confiscated, and patrons arrested. Other times, the punishment for drinking coffee could be severe, even leading to execution for repeat offenders. Yet, despite these draconian measures, coffee houses would invariably reappear, often in secret, like hydra heads sprouting anew. People simply loved their coffee too much. It's a bit like trying to ban a really popular meme. It just goes underground and spreads even faster, often with a mischievous wink. This cat-and-mouse game between authorities and coffee enthusiasts highlights coffee's powerful hold on Ottoman society. Historians still argue whether these bans were primarily driven by genuine religious conviction, by political paranoia regarding public assembly, or by economic interests from established taverns and traditional shops feeling the pinch of new competition. Perhaps it was a volatile blend of all three, simmering together like a strong Turkish brew. What's clear, however, is that the very act of trying to suppress coffee underscored its disruptive potential and its growing importance in the social fabric. Despite the controversies and crackdowns, coffee and its associated culture persevered. Each time a ban was lifted, or quietly ignored, the coffee houses would spring back to life, often more popular than before. This resilience cemented their place in Ottoman urban centres, proving that they were not a passing fad, but a fundamental shift in how people socialised and consumed information. The debates, the clandestine gatherings, the risk involved in enjoying a cup, all of this only added to coffee's allure, giving it an almost rebellious charm. It taught society that some rituals, once established, become too deeply ingrained to be easily uprooted, and as the controversies eventually faded, giving way to acceptance, the meticulous rituals around coffee consumption only grew stronger, emphasizing control, order, and refinement, a subtle triumph over its rebellious past. Having weathered the storms of religious condemnation and political suspicion, coffee not only survived but thrived, eventually ascending to the highest echelons of Ottoman society. Imagine, if you will, the opulent halls of Topkapi Palace, the air fragrant with exotic spices, and the subtle scent of rosewater. Here, within these gilded confines, the humble coffee bean was transformed from a controversial brew into an emblem of power, refinement, and sophisticated hospitality. When the Sultan himself embraced coffee, its status was undeniably sealed. The mainstream historical fact is that coffee became an integral part of the Ottoman imperial court by the late 16th century, leading to the creation of dedicated coffee preparers and elaborate courtly rituals. It wasn't just a drink for the masses, it was a drink of the Sultan, a symbol of his wealth, his taste, and his control over the most desirable commodities. The simple act of offering coffee to a foreign dignitary or a trusted advisor became a significant gesture, laden with unspoken meaning. It signified welcome, trust, and often the beginning of important negotiations. The quirkier tidbit is the establishment of the kava chibasha, or chief coffee maker, a highly esteemed position within the imperial household. This wasn't some grunt who just poured hot water over grounds. This was a meticulously selected individual, often a trusted confidant, responsible for overseeing every aspect of the Sultan's coffee, from bean selection to the precise moment of serving. His mastery of the craft was paramount, and his proximity to the Sultan gave him considerable influence. You can almost picture him, a figure of quiet authority, his hands moving with practiced grace, ensuring every cup was nothing short of perfection. It's like having a personal barista, but one whose job performance might genuinely affect international relations or the mood of an entire empire. No pressure, right? Historians still argue whether the Sultan's adoption of coffee was a strategic move to legitimize a popular but controversial beverage, or if it was simply a natural progression as the imperial court, ever keen on new luxuries, discovered its undeniable appeal. Was it political pragmatism or pure Epicurean delight that brought coffee to the throne? Perhaps it was a clever blend of both. What is certain is that the imperial seal of approval irrevocably elevated coffee from a common beverage to a status symbol, cementing its place in the culture. This imperial embrace had a ripple effect throughout society. If it was good enough for the Sultan, it was certainly good enough for everyone else. The rituals developed within the palace, the meticulous attention to detail in preparation and presentation, began to trickle down, influencing the customs of the wealthy, then the middle classes, and eventually even those with more modest means. The fine porcelain cups, the elaborate trays, the graceful movements of the servers, all these elements, perfected in the confines of the court, became aspirational standards. This focus on presentation and ritual, honed in the highest circles, naturally extended to the implements used. A simple spoon, once perhaps just a tool for stirring, would gradually acquire new significance. In a world where every gesture could carry weight, and every object could convey status, even the smallest item involved in the coffee ceremony would begin to participate in the silent language of etiquette. The stage was now set, not just for drinking coffee, but for performing the elaborate dance around it. With coffee firmly established in the Sultan's court, its preparation ceased to be a simple act and instead evolved into a precise, almost sacred performance. Imagine yourself as a nervous new apprentice in the imperial kitchens, specifically in the coffee section. The air is thick with the tantalizing scent of roasting beans, but also with an unspoken tension. Every movement is scrutinized, every step in the process a test of your skill and dedication. This isn't just making coffee, it's crafting an experience for the most powerful man in the empire. The mainstream historical fact here is that the process of preparing coffee for the Sultan was incredibly elaborate and ritualized, involving multiple stages and specialized personnel. It began with the meticulous selection of only the finest, unblemished coffee beans, often sourced from distant Yemen, hand-picked for their quality. These weren't just scooped out of a sack. They were examined, almost revered. Then came the roasting, a delicate art where the beans were carefully turned over an open flame in a copper pan until they reached the perfect shade of dark brown, never burnt, always just right. The aroma filling the air at this stage must have been intoxicating, a promise of the rich brew to come. The quirkier tidbit is that the grinding process itself was a marvel of sensory precision. After roasting, the beans were allowed to cool and then ground into an incredibly fine powder, using heavy brass or stone mortars and pestles. The goal was a consistency finer than flour, almost like powdered sugar, to ensure maximum flavor extraction. You can almost hear the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the pestle, a steady beat accompanying the transformation of hard beans into soft dust. The grind was so fine, in fact, that it allowed the coffee to truly dissolve, creating that characteristic thick, silty brew we now associate with Turkish coffee. This wasn't a quick blitz in a modern grinder. It was a slow, deliberate act that spoke of patience and reverence for the bean. Historians still argue whether this elaborate preparation was a practical necessity for brewing the best coffee given the technology of the time, or if it was primarily a performative display of luxury and imperial power. Was it about optimal taste or optimal impression? Perhaps it was both, the pursuit of perfection for its own sake, coupled with the desire to showcase the empire's resources and meticulous craftsmanship. The result, regardless of the primary motivation, was a brew of unparalleled richness and a process that emphasized precision at every turn. Finally, the brewing itself was a carefully controlled operation, often done in small individual severs, long-handled copper pots, over hot coals. The water, often specially sourced for its purity, was brought to a precise temperature, never quite boiling, to avoid scorching the delicate coffee grounds. The coffee was then poured, often with several lifts off the heat, to create the thick foam or kopuk, which was considered a mark of a well-made cup. Serving was equally precise. The kahveçibaşı would pour the coffee into tiny, handleless finjans, ensuring each cup had an equal share of the desirable foam. This meticulousness, this unyielding dedication to perfection in every stage of coffee preparation, wasn't just about making a good drink. It was about creating an experience, a ritual that mirrored the order and grandeur of the empire itself. Every detail, down to the last drop, was a statement. And in such an environment, where every element was carefully considered, it was only a matter of time before the small, seemingly insignificant spoon would find its own precise place within this grand, imperial ballet. As coffee solidified its position in the imperial court, its consumption patterns throughout the Ottoman Empire began to reflect and even reinforce the intricate social stratification already present. Imagine yourself observing a cross-section of Ottoman society, from the gilded salons of the elite to the bustling marketplaces and humble homes. You'd quickly notice that while everyone might drink coffee, how they drank it, and the elaborate rituals surrounding it, differed wildly depending on their standing. This wasn't just about personal preference. It was a subtle yet powerful performance of status. The mainstream historical fact here is that coffee consumption rituals in the Ottoman Empire varied significantly across different social classes, reflecting distinctions in wealth, influence, and access to luxury goods. At the very top, in the Sultan's court and among the wealthy elite, coffee was an elaborate, time-consuming affair involving precious porcelain or silver cups, richly embroidered serving cloths, and a retinue of meticulously trained servants. The coffee itself would be of the highest quality, prepared with painstaking care, as we just discussed. A coffee ceremony in a grand Konak mansion was not merely a refreshment, it was a social event, a display of wealth and impeccable taste, often lasting for hours. The quirkier tidbit is how specific the serving vessels became as indicators of status. While the rich might use delicate imported Chinese porcelain or intricate silver finjans nestled in ornate silver or gold zarfs, cup holders, the middle classes might opt for locally produced ceramic cups, with simpler metal holders. Further down the social ladder, in simpler homes or roadside stalls, the coffee might be served in sturdy, unadorned clay cups. You could almost read a person's social standing just by glancing at their coffee setup. It's like today, when you can tell a lot about someone by whether they're sipping from a bespoke, artisan-crafted mug, a generic chain coffee cup, or a chipped diner mug. Each tells a story. Historians still argue whether these differential consumption patterns primarily arose organically from economic disparities, or if the elite consciously cultivated and exaggerated them as a means of distinguishing themselves and reinforcing social boundaries. Was it simply about what people could afford, or was it a deliberate strategy to mark one's place in the hierarchy? What is undeniable is that coffee became a potent symbol of social identity. In the public coffee houses too, these distinctions played out. While they were generally more egalitarian than private homes, certain establishments catered to specific crowds. You had the intellectual coffee houses where scholars and poets debated, the merchant coffee houses where deals were struck, and the more rough-and-tumble places for labourers and transient workers. The quality of the coffee, the seating arrangements, and even the type of entertainment offered would vary accordingly. A Grand Vizier might visit a private, exclusive coffee house where every detail was curated, while a porter might frequent a more modest establishment where the focus was purely on the stimulating brew and lively chatter. This stratification meant that while the basic act of drinking coffee was universal, the accompanying rituals and expectations shifted dramatically. For the elite, precision and refinement were paramount, embodying their elevated status. For those with fewer means, the emphasis might have been more on the social connection and the invigorating effect. Yet, even in simpler settings, a certain decorum would have been observed, a general understanding of politeness. And it's within this intricate tapestry of varying social strata, each with its own customs and expectations, that the subtle language of the coffee spoon would begin to truly formalize, becoming a universal, albeit nuanced, signal across all social divides. While the public coffee houses were largely male domains, bustling with the chatter of men discussing politics, commerce, and philosophy, coffee's influence within the Ottoman Empire was by no means limited to masculine spaces. Indeed, a vibrant and often overlooked aspect of Ottoman coffee culture blossomed in the private sphere, the women's coffee gatherings. Imagine a secluded courtyard within a grand konak, or a modest yet elegant room in a middle-class home. The air, instead of tobacco smoke, carries the sweet scent of jasmine and the hushed, convivial murmur of female voices. Here, coffee served a subtly different, yet equally vital, social purpose. The mainstream historical fact is that women in Ottoman society frequently gathered in private homes for elaborate coffee ceremonies, which served as crucial spaces for social networking, information exchange, and cultural expression. These gatherings, often referred to as Café Alemi, Coffee World Gathering, were distinct from the public coffee houses. They offered women a precious opportunity to step away from their domestic duties, connect with peers, share news, and engage in intellectual or recreational pursuits outside the male gaze. It was their equivalent of a ladies' luncheon, but with far richer social implications and, arguably, much better coffee. The quirkier tidbit is that these female coffee gatherings were often accompanied by storytelling, music, fortune-telling from coffee grounds, kahve, falu, and the sharing of intricate embroidery patterns or recipes. It wasn't just about sipping coffee, it was about fostering community, sharing knowledge, and passing down traditions. You can almost picture them, leaning in conspiratorially, eyes sparkling over the rim of their finjans. As one friend recounts a juicy piece of neighborhood gossip, or another unveils a particularly challenging new needlework design. It was a vital cultural and intellectual hub, a place where minds could be sharpened and bonds strengthened. This private, intimate setting allowed for a unique evolution of coffee etiquette, often emphasizing graciousness and subtle communication even more than the public sphere. Historians still argue whether these women's coffee gatherings were a response to their exclusion from public male spaces, or if they developed organically as a reflection of traditional female social patterns. Were they a second best option, or a preferred, more intimate alternative? Regardless, these gatherings played an indispensable role in maintaining social cohesion and transmitting cultural norms among women, proving that coffee was a truly democratic beverage in its ability to facilitate connection across all segments of society, albeit in different venues. The atmosphere in these women's gatherings was often one of refined elegance and subtle competition in terms of hospitality. Hosts would take immense pride in the quality of their coffee, the beauty of their serving sets, and the perfection of their service. The preparation of the coffee itself might be done by a female servant, or by the lady of the house herself, showcasing her domestic skills. The presentation would be immaculate, from the polished copper trays to the freshly laundered embroidered cloths. Every detail contributed to an overall impression of graciousness and respect for the guests. This emphasis on meticulous presentation and unspoken communication within the women's sphere would have profoundly influenced the development of coffee etiquette. In a setting where direct confrontation was often avoided and social harmony was paramount, subtle cues became incredibly important. The way a cup was held, the manner in which it was presented, and critically, the placement of the accompanying spoon could all convey a wealth of meaning without a single word being uttered. It was in these private, intimate spaces that the silent language of the 14 spoon rules found fertile ground to develop and be perfected, becoming a sophisticated tool for communication within a nuanced social environment. As coffee became increasingly integrated into the social fabric of the Ottoman Empire, from imperial courts to private female gatherings and bustling public houses, the vessel it was served in also underwent a significant transformation, evolving from a mere container into an object of art and a silent signifier of status. Imagine you are holding a tiny, exquisite cup in your hands. It's delicate, almost impossibly thin, yet warm, with the steaming, fragrant brew. Your fingers instinctively trace its smooth, unblemished surface. This is not just a cup, it is a finjan. The mainstream historical fact here is that the finjan, the small handleless cup used for Ottoman coffee, became an iconic symbol of the culture, with its design, material, and accompanying zarf cup holder reflecting wealth and aesthetic sensibilities. Unlike European cups that often had handles, the traditional finjan was designed to be cradled in a zarf or held with the fingertips around the rim. This allowed the drinker to experience the warmth of the coffee directly, a sensory connection that was part of the ritual. The quirkier tidbit is the incredible variety and artistry that went into these finjans and their zarfs. While common folk might use simple earthenware, the elite would commission cups made from the finest imported porcelain, often from China or later from European manufactories like Meissen, renowned for their delicate patterns and translucency. These precious cups would then be placed into zarfs, crafted from silver, gold, brass, or intricately carved wood, often adorned with filigree, gemstones, or enamel work. Imagine a tiny porcelain cup, no bigger than an egg, cradled in a zarf of pure gold, shimmering with intricate patterns, a true miniature masterpiece. It was a statement piece, silently broadcasting the owner's taste and affluence. This wasn't just functional, it was wearable art, if you can wear a cup. Historians still argue whether the handleless design was purely a matter of tradition and aesthetic preference, or if it served a practical purpose in a society where hands might not always be perfectly clean, making the zarf a hygienic necessity. Was it elegance or practicality that dictated the form? Perhaps it was a fusion of both, with practicality evolving into a distinct aesthetic. What is clear is that the finjan and zarf combination became an inseparable duo, each enhancing the other, each part of the silent communication of a coffee ceremony. The importance of the finjan cannot be overstated. It was the immediate point of contact between the drinker and the coffee, and its quality signalled the host's respect for the guest. A chipped cup, or one of inferior material, could be seen as an insult, while a beautifully crafted set indicated honour and graciousness. This meticulous attention to detail in the serving vessel itself reinforced the idea that every element of the coffee experience was significant, contributing to the overall ritual. As the finjan became more refined, and the act of serving coffee more formalized, the need for an accompanying implement, beyond just the spoon for stirring, began to emerge. The delicate nature of some of these cups, particularly the handleless ones, meant that certain actions, such as stirring in sugar, which was rare in early Ottoman coffee, usually served black, or simply manoeuvring the thick sediment at the bottom, required a specialized tool. Thus, the humble spoon, initially a simple utility, was poised to join the finjan as a silent actor in the complex drama of Ottoman coffee etiquette, ready to take on a far greater symbolic role than its size suggested. The evolution of Ottoman coffee etiquette didn't stop with the cup. It naturally extended to the accessories that accompanied the fragrant brew. Imagine the meticulously arranged tray, bearing not just the exquisite finjan and its ornate zarf, but also a new, increasingly vital component, the saucer. And alongside it, though initially less prominent, the small, almost jewel-like spoon. These additions, while seemingly minor, added new dimensions of refinement and complexity to the coffee ritual, deepening the unspoken language of the serving. The mainstream historical fact here is that the introduction of saucers and spoons to Ottoman coffee service became common practice, enhancing both practicality and the formality of the ceremony. While the handleless finjan was traditionally held in a metal zarf, the saucer provided an additional layer of protection for delicate surfaces from heat or spills, and offered a convenient resting place for the cup between sips. Before saucers, one might have to place the hot zarf directly on a table or hold it continuously. The saucer offered a discreet and elegant solution, much like putting a coaster under your glass today. The quirkier tidbit about the saucer is its transformation into another canvas for artistic expression. Just like the finjan and zarf, saucers were crafted from various materials, from simple ceramic to intricate silver, or even mother-of-pearl loffen, complementing the design of the cup. A guest might admire not just the finjan, but the entire ensemble, appreciating the host's refined taste and attention to detail. Imagine a saucer rimmed with delicate floral patterns, or inlaid with shimmering mother-of-pearl, a miniature stage upon which the finjan rested. It wasn't just a practical item, it was part of the visual poetry of the coffee service. Historians still argue whether the widespread adoption of saucers was primarily influenced by European trends where saucers were already common with tea and chocolate, or if it developed independently within Ottoman culture as a natural progression of refining the coffee service. Did Ottoman society import the idea or invent it anew for coffee's specific needs? What's clear is that the saucer added a layer of aesthetic completeness and practical convenience to the coffee ritual, making the entire experience more polished. And then there was the spoon. Initially, its role might have been purely functional, to stir in sugar if it was offered, though traditional Ottoman coffee was often consumed black or very lightly sweetened, or to scrape the last vestiges of the thick, flavourful sediment at the bottom of the cup, a practice common among some connoisseurs. But as the coffee ritual grew in complexity and formality, particularly in upper-class households and at court, the spoon began to transcend its utilitarian purpose. Its presence on the saucer, accompanying the finjan, was a subtle but significant addition. It completed the set, making the offering feel more complete, more luxurious. This tiny implement, often crafted from silver or even gold, its handle perhaps intricately engraved, was now an integral part of the presentation. It was placed with precision, signalling that every component of the coffee service had a designated place and purpose. This deliberate placement, this silent inclusion, set the stage for the spoon to become far more than just a stirring tool, paving the way for the development of its own complex and unspoken language. The stage was now fully set for the intricate dance of the 14 spoon rules to take centre stage. The little spoon, once perhaps just an afterthought, a convenient implement for a specific task, began its transformation within Ottoman coffee culture into something far more significant. Imagine it now, resting delicately on the saucer next to your steaming finjan. It's no longer just a stirrer, it's a subtle prop in a silent play, a tiny tool imbued with a new, nuanced purpose. Its practical evolution, therefore, became a fascinating precursor to its eventual symbolic weight. The mainstream historical fact is that the coffee spoon's initial primary function was indeed practical, mainly for stirring in sugar, if used, or for navigating the thick sediment common in traditional Ottoman coffee. Unlike modern filter coffee, Ottoman coffee leaves a fine, silty layer at the bottom of the cup. For some, enjoying the last, intensely flavoured dregs, or simply ensuring a smooth sip without consuming too much sediment, the spoon was undeniably useful. It was the implement that allowed for a certain level of control over your consumption, particularly as tastes for sweetness varied. The quirkier tidbit is that in some circles, using the spoon to scrape the very bottom of the finjan was considered a mark of appreciation for the quality of the coffee, or perhaps a sign of a true connoisseur who wanted to savour every last bit of the rich brew, sediment, and all. It's a bit like scraping the last bits of melted ice cream from a bowl, a telltale sign of enjoyment. However, this act had to be done with grace, without an audible scraping sound that might be considered uncouth. So, even in its practical use, there was an underlying layer of decorum. This delicate balance between utility and refinement subtly set the stage for its more formal roles. Historians still argue whether the widespread adoption of the coffee spoon was a spontaneous development driven by practical needs, or if it was encouraged by the increasing formality of coffee service, where every element, no matter how small, was expected to contribute to the overall elegance. Did its utility lead to its prominence, or did its prominence demand a utility? Perhaps it was a feedback loop, with practical use refining into refined practice. What's clear is that the spoon became an indispensable part of the coffee set. As coffee ceremonies became more elaborate, especially in the homes of the wealthy and within the imperial court, the spoon's material and craftsmanship also improved. Simple brass spoons gave way to ornate silver or even gold ones, often decorated with filigree, intricate engravings, or tiny precious stones on their handles. These weren't just functional implements, they were miniature works of art, mirroring the beauty of the finjan and zarf. Their very presence elevated the coffee experience, signaling the host's generosity and attention to every detail. This shift from mere utility to refined accessory was crucial. When an object becomes beautiful and valuable, it also becomes worthy of more careful consideration regarding its placement and use. No longer just for stirring, the spoon started to acquire unspoken meanings based on its position. Its small size, its delicate nature, and its intimate proximity to the cup made it an ideal silent messenger. It could be moved discreetly, almost imperceptibly, to convey a thought, a desire, or a feeling, without needing to interrupt the flow of conversation or break the serene atmosphere of the gathering. This meticulous approach to even the smallest detail laid the perfect groundwork for the emergence of the mysterious and fascinating 14 spoon rules, transforming a simple tool into a key component of a complex, silent language. Having explored the humble spoon's journey, from a purely practical stirrer to an elegant accessory, we now arrive at the heart of our story, the fascinating core of Ottoman coffee etiquette, the esoteric 14 spoon rules. Imagine you are a guest in a grand Ottoman household, the air perfumed with rosewater and coffee, classical music softly playing. A delicate finjan is placed before you, its accompanying spoon resting silently on the saucer. You know instinctively that this small metal object holds more meaning than meets the eye. Every nuance of its placement, every subtle shift, is a carefully orchestrated part of a silent conversation. The mainstream historical fact here, often surprising to modern ears, is that Ottoman coffee culture developed an incredibly intricate, unwritten code of conduct, which included a detailed set of 14 specific rules governing the placement and manipulation of the coffee spoon. This wasn't some whimsical suggestion. It was a deeply ingrained system of non-verbal communication, particularly prevalent among the educated elite and within formal social gatherings. These rules allowed guests to convey a range of messages to their host or server without uttering a single word, preserving the serene atmosphere and avoiding potentially awkward direct requests. It was the ultimate form of polite, indirect communication. The quirky tidbit is that mastering these 14 rules was considered a hallmark of true social grace and sophistication. A clumsy or ignorant placement of the spoon could betray one's lack of refinement, or worse, send an unintended, embarrassing message. Imagine the pressure. It's a bit like learning to navigate a complex set of unspoken hand gestures in a foreign culture, get it wrong, and you might accidentally insult your host. This emphasis on subtle, non-verbal cues speaks volumes about the value placed on politeness and harmony in Ottoman social interactions. Historians still argue whether these 14 rules were formalized and taught explicitly, or if they evolved organically through generations of polite society, absorbed by observation and imitation. Was there a secret spoon etiquette handbook, or was it all simply learned through osmosis? What is clear is that they became a recognized, albeit unwritten, protocol, a silent language understood by all who moved in polite Ottoman circles. These rules covered everything from how you indicated your desire for more coffee, to your level of satisfaction with the brew, to your intention to depart. Each position, Each gentle movement had a specific, unambiguous meaning. The spoon, therefore, became a powerful tool for discreet communication, allowing guests to express needs or feelings without causing any disturbance or demanding direct attention from their host, who might be engaged in conversation. It allowed for a seamless flow of hospitality where wishes were anticipated rather than requested. Over the next several sections, we'll delve into the specifics of these 14 rules, understanding the precise meaning behind each subtle placement. You'll discover how a simple object, often no more than a few inches long, could convey complex messages like, "I am satisfied," "I would like another cup," or even "I am in a hurry." It's a testament to the ingenuity and subtlety of Ottoman social engineers, who turned a humble utensil into a sophisticated instrument of etiquette, making every coffee ceremony a performance of grace and unspoken understanding. So, lean in and let's unlock the secrets of this fascinating, silent language. Now that we've grasped the general significance of the 14 spoon rules, let's dive into their specific meanings, starting with the very first and arguably most fundamental one, the initial placement. Imagine you've just been seated, perhaps on a plush cushion, and a servant gracefully places a finjan of steaming coffee before you, nestled in its ornate zarf, with the spoon resting quietly on the accompanying saucer. This initial position, seemingly innocuous, immediately begins the silent conversation, signaling your readiness to engage with the ceremony. The mainstream historical fact here is that the specific initial placement of the spoon on the saucer or alongside the cup was the first unspoken cue in the Ottoman coffee etiquette system. Typically, the spoon would be placed parallel to the cup's handle, if one existed, though often it did not, or simply at the 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock position on the saucer, pointing towards the cup. This seemingly simple arrangement wasn't just decorative, it was a baseline, a neutral position indicating that the guest was ready to begin the coffee drinking experience. It meant, essentially, I am here, I am present, and I am ready to receive. The quirkier tidbit is that this initial placement could subtly vary based on the host's regional or family customs. But the core principle remained. It was the starting point from which all other messages would be derived. A host would immediately note how the spoon was presented to you, and how you subsequently handled it as the first indications of your understanding of proper etiquette. It's a bit like the opening move in a chess game. It sets the tone for everything that follows. If you picked it up immediately and started tapping it, you might as well have shouted, "I have no idea what I'm doing." Historians still argue whether this initial placement was a universal standard across all Ottoman domains, or if minor regional variations existed, understood only by locals. Was it a rigid, empire-wide rule, or a flexible local custom? What is clear is that this seemingly simple starting point was deeply embedded in the social fabric, acting as the first unspoken signal in a complex interaction. From the host's perspective, observing the initial placement was crucial. It confirmed that the coffee had been served correctly and that the guest had acknowledged its presence. A well-trained servant, too, would scan the spoons on the saucers as they moved through a gathering, picking up on these initial, subtle cues before any further action was required. This baseline position allowed for a seamless and unobtrusive beginning to the coffee ritual. This first rule wasn't about expressing a desire or a complaint, it was about confirming presence and readiness. It provided a common starting point for the silent dialogue that was about to unfold. Without this established neutral position, the subsequent movements and placements would lose their meaning. It was the hello of Ottoman coffee etiquette, a polite acknowledgement that both parties were now engaged in the ritual. As you reached for your cup, your fingers might brush the spoon, a silent recognition of its presence, and a mental preparation for the silent messages it might soon convey. This seemingly static initial positioning held the potential for all the dynamic communications to follow, waiting for your next subtle move. With the initial, neutral placement of the spoon established, the silent conversation truly begins, and it's time to delve into the next crucial set of signals. Rules 2 through 5, concerning invitation and acceptance. Imagine you've taken your first thoughtful sip of the rich, dark coffee. Now, how do you politely indicate your enjoyment, your desire for more, or your general comfort without uttering a single word? The spoon becomes your eloquent proxy. The mainstream historical fact here is that a specific series of spoon placements communicated a guest's desire for a refill, their appreciation of the coffee, or their intention to linger. These movements were subtle, often requiring a keen eye from the host or server, but they were universally understood within polite Ottoman circles. This wasn't about demanding, it was about gently indicating. Let's break them down. Rule 2. Spoon resting on the rim of the cup, pointing to the right. This was a clear, yet indirect, signal that you enjoyed the coffee and would welcome another cup. Imagine a subtle shift. Your fingers, having set the finjan back on its saucer, now gently nudge the spoon from its neutral position so its handle rests on the saucer, but its bowl delicately hooks over the rim of the cup, pointing away from you to your right. It's a gesture of quiet anticipation, a polite more, please. It's like leaving your empty glass slightly pushed forward at a dinner party, a subtle hint without outright asking. Rule 3. Spoon placed inside the empty cup, resting against the bottom. This was a stronger indication of immediate desire for a refill, perhaps signifying that you had thoroughly enjoyed your first cup and were ready for a swift second. Picture yourself having drained your finjan, and then, instead of placing the spoon on the saucer, you drop it gently into the cup, letting it clink softly against the bottom. This isn't a desperate plea, but a clear, I'm finished and ready for another whenever convenient. It suggests a level of comfort and genuine appreciation for the host's hospitality. The quirkier tidbit is how precisely these subtle movements had to be executed. Too forceful, and it might seem rude. Too hesitant, and it might be missed. The art lay in the almost imperceptible grace of the gesture. A skilled guest could convey their message with a movement so fluid it seemed accidental, yet was entirely intentional. This level of nuance made the etiquette a true performance art, albeit a silent one. You needed the dexterity of a surgeon and the subtlety of a diplomat. Rule 4. Spoon placed diagonally across the saucer, handle pointing towards the guest. This signal was often interpreted as a polite, generalized expression of satisfaction with the coffee and the hospitality without necessarily asking for more right now. It implied contentment and a desire to continue enjoying the atmosphere. Imagine the spoon laid at an angle, perhaps from the 7 o'clock to the 1 o'clock position relative to the guest, a relaxed, open posture. It's a bit like giving a silent thumbs up to the overall experience. Rule 5. Spoon held loosely between thumb and forefinger, resting on the saucer beside the cup. This was a more engaged signal, indicating active enjoyment and engagement with the conversation, potentially implying that you might want more coffee later, but were perfectly content for the moment. It conveyed a casual readiness, a relaxed state where you were open to the possibility of more, but not actively seeking it. It's a relaxed, I'm good for now, but don't count me out. Historians still argue whether the specific directionality, e.g., spoon pointing right versus left, had additional localized meanings, or if the primary message was conveyed simply by the spoon's relation to the cup. Was there a secret compass embedded in these rules, or was it more about general position? What is undeniable is that these initial signals of acceptance and invitation formed the bedrock of the guest-host exchange, allowing for a seamless flow of hospitality that anticipated needs without overt requests. These subtle dances of the spoon laid the groundwork for a truly sophisticated, silent conversation. As our silent coffee ceremony progresses, the guest now moves beyond merely indicating a desire for more coffee or general contentment. We delve into rules that subtly communicate a different, equally important set of messages. Rules 6 through 9, dealing with satisfaction and refusal. Imagine you've savoured your coffee, perhaps even a second cup. How do you politely convey that you've had enough, that you are perfectly satisfied, or that you wish to decline a further offering, all without uttering a single word? The little spoon, once again, holds the key. The mainstream historical fact here is that Ottoman coffee etiquette included specific spoon placements to politely signal a guest's completion of their coffee consumption or their desire to decline further servings. This was crucial for maintaining decorum and avoiding awkward situations where a host might insist on refilling a cup when the guest was already full. It speaks to a deep cultural emphasis on anticipating needs and respecting boundaries, even in the context of hospitality. Let's examine these nuanced signals. Rule 6. Spoon placed directly across the top of the cup. This was a clear yet gentle signal that you were finished and satisfied, indicating that no more coffee was desired. Imagine your finjan is still half full, but you've had enough. You carefully lift the spoon and lay it horizontally across the opening of the cup, like a tiny bridge. It's a polite, no more thank you, a visual barrier to any further pouring. It's like placing your hand over your glass when a server tries to refill it, but much more subtle and elegant. Rule 7. Spoon placed face down on the saucer, parallel to the cup. This indicated that you were not only finished, but also highly satisfied with the coffee and the hospitality. It was a gesture of profound contentment and appreciation, a silent compliment to the host's excellent brew and graciousness. Picture the spoon turned over, its bowl resting flat against the saucer, conveying a sense of finality and deep pleasure. This wasn't just "I'm full," it was "that was absolutely delightful and I couldn't possibly have another drop, thank you." The quirkier tidbit here is that the precise angle and flatness of the spoon in Rule 7 could further convey the degree of satisfaction. A perfectly flat, meticulously placed spoon might indicate supreme pleasure, whereas a slightly askew one might simply mean polite completion. It's a bit like the difference between a heartfelt thank you and a perfunctory one conveyed entirely through the subtle posture of a metal utensil. This attention to minute detail is what makes this system so captivating. Rule 8. Spoon placed vertically inside the empty cup, handle pointing straight up. This was a more direct and unambiguous refusal for any further coffee. If you had finished your cup and absolutely did not want another, placing the spoon upright inside the cup acted as an unmistakable stop. It's a very clear signal, almost like a flag being raised. This would be used when you truly needed to convey a firm no, perhaps because you were in a hurry or had a sensitive stomach. Rule 9. Spoon resting on the saucer, pointing away from the guest towards the server. This subtle placement was typically used when the guest felt they had already imposed enough on the host's hospitality and wished to signal that they did not require anything further, including more coffee, and were content as they were. It's a polite dismissal of continued service, indicating that you were perfectly comfortable and needed no additional fuss. Imagine the spoon's bowl pointed directly at the servant who brought the coffee, a silent, "I'm quite all right, don't trouble yourself further." Historians still argue whether some of these refusal signals were originally meant to convey a lack of enjoyment, or if they evolved purely as polite ways to decline. Was there ever a truly negative spoon signal, or was politeness always paramount? What is certain is that these rules allowed for graceful exits and comfortable conclusions to the coffee drinking part of the ceremony, ensuring that hospitality flowed smoothly without misinterpretations. The spoon, in these instances, became the ultimate instrument of polite refusal, maintaining harmony and respect in every interaction. Having navigated the signals of invitation and polite refusal, our silent spoon language now guides us towards the grand finale of a coffee ceremony. Rules 10 through 12, signaling departure and offering profound compliments. Imagine the conversation winding down, the afternoon light softening, and you know it's time to take your leave. How do you gracefully indicate your intention to depart and express your deep gratitude, all without a single potentially abrupt spoken word? The small, unassuming spoon once again orchestrates the perfect, polite conclusion. The mainstream historical fact here is that specific spoon placements were designated to communicate a guest's readiness to depart and to convey sincere appreciation for the hospitality. These were not merely utilitarian gestures, they were deeply symbolic acts, reinforcing the guest's respect for the host and the harmonious conclusion of the visit. In a culture that valued indirect communication and the avoidance of direct imposition, these subtle signals were paramount. Let's unravel these final graceful gestures. Rule 10. Spoon placed underneath the cup on the saucer. This was a very direct and unmistakable signal that the guest was preparing to leave. It indicated a clear intention to rise and bid farewell in the near future. Imagine gently lifting your finjan and sliding the spoon underneath it, so it's hidden from view. It's a bit like someone tidying their belongings and subtly reaching for their coat, a clear, non-verbal sign that the visit is drawing to a close. This signal was particularly useful in longer, more formal gatherings, allowing the host to prepare for the guest's departure without being explicitly told. Rule 11. Spoon placed on the saucer, bowl facing the guest, handle pointing towards the host. This was a nuanced compliment, indicating not only satisfaction, but also a profound appreciation for the host's excellent taste in coffee and the overall quality of the hospitality. It was a silent thank you for everything. It was perfect. Picture the spoon laid out, its concave part facing you, a gesture of receiving and appreciating, while its handle subtly directs the gratitude towards the person who offered the kindness. It's a sophisticated way of saying, your coffee, your company, your generosity, all were truly exceptional. This gesture would likely bring a small, knowing smile to the host's face. The quirkier tidbit here is that the precise orientation of the spoon in Rule 11 was critical. If the handle pointed slightly away from the host, it might be misinterpreted as a more neutral or even slightly critical comment. The subtle angle of the handle was key to ensuring the compliment landed perfectly. It's like the difference between saying, "nice dress," and saying, "that dress is really nice on you." The emphasis, or in this case, the direction, changes everything. Rule 12. Spoon placed vertically across the saucer, often with the bowl pointing up. This was a signal of utmost gratitude and profound respect, particularly used after a lengthy or particularly enjoyable visit, or when a guest wished to convey that the hospitality had exceeded all expectations. It was a silent bow, a deep acknowledgement of the host's generosity. Imagine the spoon standing almost upright against the cup, or simply laid vertically across the saucer, its bowl open as if receiving blessings. This was reserved for moments when deep appreciation was felt, a silent gesture that spoke volumes about the guest's esteem for the host. Historians still argue whether these departure signals were designed to prevent guests from overstaying their welcome, or simply to provide a polite mechanism for transition. Was it about gentle prodding or graceful farewells? What is certain is that these rules allowed for a harmonious and elegant conclusion to any social gathering, ensuring that both host and guest felt respected and understood. The spoon, in its final performance, ensured that the memory of the visit ended on a note of impeccable courtesy, solidifying its role as a master of silent, sophisticated communication. We've journeyed through the most common and widely understood of the Ottoman spoon rules, from initial readiness to invitations for more coffee, and finally to polite refusal and graceful departure. But like any truly comprehensive language, this silent code also accounted for less common, yet equally important, scenarios. These are Rules 13 and 14, reserved for special circumstances or particular, often urgent, messages. Imagine a situation where direct speech might be impolite, inappropriate, or even dangerous, yet a crucial message must be conveyed. The subtle yet potent language of the spoon steps in. The mainstream historical fact here is that a few of the 14 spoon rules were specifically designed for exceptional situations, allowing for urgent or highly sensitive communication without drawing overt attention. These were the emergency or secret signals within the coffee etiquette, allowing a guest to subtly alert their host to a need that couldn't be voiced aloud, or to convey a particularly strong sentiment. Let's explore these rarely used, but powerfully meaningful, signals. Rule 13. Spoon dropped to the floor, accidentally on purpose. This was an extreme and very rare signal, used in dire circumstances to alert the host to immediate danger, a grave concern, or a desperate need for help. It was meant to be dramatic enough to catch attention, but disguised as an accident. Imagine the clatter of the tiny spoon on the polished marble floor, a sharp sound cutting through the gentle hum of conversation. The immediate reaction of the host would be to inquire, "Oh dear, is everything all right?" giving the guest an opportunity to whisper a crucial message or to be discreetly led away. This wasn't a casual drop. It was a desperate plea for discreet intervention. It's the silent equivalent of pushing the panic button under the table. The quirkier tidbit about Rule 13 is that the accidental nature had to be convincing. A host would be keenly aware of the gravity of the situation based on the guest's demeanour after the drop. If the guest looked genuinely distressed or made subtle eye contact, the host would understand the urgency. If it was truly an accident, the guest would simply apologize profusely and perhaps blush. The nuance was everything. This rule highlights the profound trust and understanding that existed between individuals who mastered this intricate non-verbal communication system. Rule 14. Spoon placed upright against the inner wall of the cup, almost at a precarious angle. This signal was used to convey a strong sense of urgency, often that the guest had a very limited time and needed to conclude the visit or discussion swiftly. It wasn't an insult, but a plea for understanding and a discreet way to manage time constraints. Imagine the spoon standing almost precariously, as if about to fall, signifying a delicate balance and an imminent need for movement. It's like glancing at your watch pointedly, but far more polite and less distracting. It implied, "I deeply regret it, but I must leave very soon." Historians still argue whether Rule 13, the dropped spoon, was more commonly employed for genuine danger or for less severe but still urgent social plights, such as needing to discreetly request a carriage or avoid an unwanted conversation. Was it truly a signal for life or death situations or for social emergencies? What is certain is that these two final rules underscore the depth and flexibility of the Ottoman spoon etiquette, proving it was a robust communication system capable of handling almost any social contingency, from the mundane to the urgent. These last two rules reveal the true sophistication of the Ottoman approach to politeness. Even in moments of distress or urgency, the emphasis remained on indirect communication, preserving the outward appearance of calm and harmony. The spoon, in these scenarios, transcended its role as a mere etiquette tool and became a crucial link in a chain of unspoken understanding, a silent scream or a quiet plea for expedited departure, all within the bounds of profound grace. With the 14 esoteric spoon rules now laid out, from the welcoming initial placement to the rare signals of urgency, it's crucial to understand a key participant in this silent drama: the servant's observance. Imagine yourself not as the guest, but as the trained coffee server in an opulent Ottoman household. Your role isn't just to prepare and deliver the fragrant brew, it's to be a silent, ever vigilant interpreter of a complex non-verbal language. Your keen observation skills are paramount, for a misread spoon could lead to an etiquette faux pas, or worse, a missed opportunity for the host to truly shine. The mainstream historical fact here is that well-trained household servants played a critical role in observing and interpreting the guest's spoon signals, acting as intermediaries between the guest's unspoken desires and the host's hospitality. These servants were not merely automatons delivering cups, they were highly skilled individuals, almost like social intelligence officers, whose job it was to anticipate needs and ensure the seamless flow of the coffee ceremony. Their ability to read the room through these subtle cues was a testament to their training and the sophistication of Ottoman hospitality. The quirkier tidbit is that a servant's mastery of spoon interpretation was often a source of pride for the household. A host might boast about their kaveci, coffee server, being so intuitive that they never had to ask for a refill or state their intention to leave. The coffee simply appeared at the right moment, or a carriage was subtly readied for departure. It was a silent ballet of anticipation and response, where the servant acted as the unseen choreographer. Imagine the subtle glance, the almost imperceptible nod between a host and their kaveci after a guest makes a specific spoon movement, a silent affirmation of understanding. It's a bit like a highly trained butler in a classic British drama, always one step ahead, but without the stiff upper lip. Historians still argue whether the servant's training in these signals was purely through rote memorization and practical experience, or if there were specific, perhaps oral, traditions passed down through generations of household staff. Was it learned through informal apprenticeship, or through a formal etiquette academy for servants? What is certain is that their role was indispensable. Without their keen eyes and quick understanding, the elegant system of spoon communication would have fallen apart. The servant's observation wasn't a passive act. As they circulated among the guests, offering refreshments or clearing empty cups, their eyes would discreetly flick towards the saucers. They would register the position of each spoon, mentally cross-referencing it with the established rules. Was the spoon resting on the rim? A silent note. Guest at table 3 needs a refill soon. Was it placed face down on the saucer? Guest at table 5 is satisfied. Prepare for departure soon. This constant, unobtrusive monitoring allowed for a level of personalized service that would be the envy of any modern luxury hotel. This meticulous observance ensured that the guest felt constantly attended to, yet never pressured. The unspoken nature of the communication maintained a serene atmosphere, allowing conversations to flow uninterrupted. The servant became the unseen hand of hospitality, making sure every need was met with graceful efficiency, all orchestrated by the silent, eloquent language of the humble coffee spoon. Their attentiveness truly completed the circuit of communication, transforming individual gestures into a fluid, responsive interaction. Having understood the mechanics of the 14 spoon rules and the critical role of the observant servant, let's now consider the broader implication of this intricate system, spoon etiquette, as social currency. Imagine yourself as a young, aspiring member of Ottoman high society. You've mastered the art of conversation, the nuances of poetry, and the latest fashion trends. But to truly belong, to effortlessly navigate the refined circles of the elite, you also needed to master a silent language, a hidden code that signaled your understanding of sophisticated social dynamics. The ability to correctly interpret and subtly utilize these spoon signals was a powerful indicator of your social polish and cultural literacy. The mainstream historical fact here is that mastery of the Ottoman coffee spoon etiquette was a significant marker of social standing, refinement, and an understanding of the unspoken rules of polite society. It wasn't just about good manners, it was about demonstrating that you were an insider, someone who understood the subtle cues and expectations of elite interactions. Those who flubbed a spoon placement or missed a host's subtle signal revealed themselves as unrefined or, worse, unschooled in the delicate art of Ottoman social grace. It was a litmus test, a silent examination of your social savoir-faire. The quirkier tidbit is that this mastery wasn't something overtly taught in schools, but rather absorbed through observation and immersion in elite households. A young person learning the ropes would pay close attention to elders, mimicking their subtle gestures, internalizing the rhythm of the coffee ceremony. It's a bit like learning to read between the lines in a complex social situation today. You either get it or you don't, and those who get it are instantly recognized. This unspoken education underscored the value placed on intuition and discrete intelligence. You could say it was the original soft skill required for climbing the social ladder. Historians still argue whether this elaborate etiquette developed primarily as a way for the elite to exclude others, creating a barrier to entry for the less sophisticated, or if it simply evolved organically as a means of enhancing polite interactions. Was it a deliberate gatekeeping mechanism, or a natural byproduct of refined living? What is clear is that those who wielded their spoons with effortless grace were perceived as highly cultivated individuals, capable of navigating complex social landscapes with ease and confidence. For a guest, using the correct spoon signal meant you were considerate, discreet, and respectful of your host's generosity and the harmonious atmosphere. It showed you understood that hospitality was a two-way street where both parties contributed to the flow of the interaction. For a host, observing a guest's perfect execution of these signals was a source of quiet satisfaction, confirming that their guest was indeed a person of discernment and good breeding. It fostered a sense of mutual respect and understanding that transcended explicit conversation. In a society where direct communication could sometimes be seen as impolite or even confrontational, the spoon offered an elegant alternative. It allowed for a sophisticated dance of give and take, where needs were met and appreciation was expressed without a single word breaking the serene silence. This intricate system of non-verbal cues elevated the simple act of drinking coffee into a profound social ritual, demonstrating that in Ottoman society, even the smallest gesture could carry immense weight, proving that sometimes the quietest actions speak the loudest. The spoon wasn't just a utensil, it was a passport to polite society, a subtle yet powerful piece of social currency. Just as all intricate systems eventually adapt or simplify with the tides of time, so too did the elaborate dance of the 14 Ottoman spoon rules. Imagine stepping forward from the hushed elegance of a 17th century konak into the bustling, rapidly modernizing Istanbul of the 19th or early 20th century. The pace of life quickens, foreign influences arrive, and the rigid formalities that once defined social interaction begin to soften. In this evolving landscape, the hyper-specific language of the coffee spoon, while never entirely forgotten, began its slow, inevitable decline of spoon specificity. The mainstream historical fact here is that as the Ottoman Empire modernized and its interactions with the West increased, the strict adherence to all 14 esoteric spoon rules gradually waned, giving way to simpler and more generalized forms of coffee etiquette. This wasn't a sudden abandonment, but a gradual fading, akin to an old dialect slowly being replaced by a more universal language. The nuances became less critical, and the unspoken pressure to perform every gesture perfectly began to dissipate. The quirkier tidbit is that this simplification was often a result of practicalities. As coffee became even more ubiquitous and the pace of life accelerated, there was less time and perhaps less inclination for such protracted, subtle communication. Imagine a busy merchant in a bustling coffee house, trying to decipher 14 different spoon positions from multiple customers. It would be an impossible task. The need for efficiency subtly chipped away at the highly formalized aspects of the ritual. It's a bit like how we no longer send handwritten, elaborately sealed letters when a quick text message will do. Convenience, as it often does, began to trump elaborate formality. Historians still argue whether this decline was primarily due to westernization and the adoption of simpler European table manners, or if it was an internal evolution driven by the changing social dynamics within the late Ottoman Empire. Was it an import of new customs, or an organic simplification born of necessity? What is clear is that the sheer complexity of the 14 rules, once a mark of sophistication, became less practical in a world that was moving at an increasingly faster clip. While the most intricate distinctions faded, a few of the more fundamental spoon signals did persist, albeit in a generalized form. For instance, placing the spoon in the empty cup, Rule 3, remained a widely understood, albeit informal, way to request a refill. Similarly, laying the spoon across the top of the cup, Rule 6, continued to serve as a polite no more. The highly specific angles and minute positional variations, however, largely disappeared from common practice, becoming more of an arcane knowledge confined to older generations or extremely traditional households. This simplification of spoon etiquette mirrored broader shifts in Ottoman society, where traditional hierarchies and customs were increasingly challenged by new ideas and global influences. The emphasis shifted from rigid adherence to established forms to a more relaxed, yet still polite, approach to social interaction. While the meticulous artistry of the 14 rules may have dimmed, the underlying spirit of gracious hospitality and thoughtful communication endured, evolving into a less prescriptive, but still elegant, approach to enjoying the beloved national beverage. The spoon remained, but its voice became less a whisper of coded messages and more a gentle murmur of general politeness. Though the intricate dance of the 14 spoon rules may have receded into the annals of history, a charming and fascinating artifact of a bygone era, the spirit of Ottoman coffee etiquette never truly vanished. Imagine walking into a modern Turkish home today, or perhaps a bustling cafe in Istanbul. While you won't see guests meticulously arranging spoons to convey urgent messages or subtle compliments, you will still encounter modern echoes of etiquette, subtle nods to the rich history of coffee ritual that persist to this day. The mainstream historical fact here is that while the detailed 14 spoon rules are no longer actively practiced, the core principles of politeness, hospitality, and thoughtful presentation in Turkish coffee service remain deeply ingrained in the culture. The emphasis shifted from complex coded messages to broader gestures of respect and generosity. You might not be trying to figure out if someone wants a refill based on the angle of their spoon, but you'll certainly notice the careful way the coffee is prepared and served. The quirkier tidbit is how some of these general principles manifest. For example, it's still considered polite to offer water alongside Turkish coffee, a tradition that dates back centuries. This isn't just for quenching thirst. It's meant to cleanse the palate before and after, sipping the rich, unfiltered brew, enhancing the flavor experience. Imagine taking a sip of cool water before your coffee, preparing your senses for the explosion of flavor, a small, subtle act that enhances the whole ritual. It's like having a little sorbet between courses at a fancy meal, but for your coffee. Historians still argue whether the persistence of these broader etiquette principles is a conscious continuation of tradition, or if they have simply become so ingrained in Turkish culture that they are practiced without explicit thought of their historical origins. Is it deliberate cultural preservation, or just the way things are done? What is clear is that the reverence for the coffee ceremony, albeit simplified, endures. Today, when you are served Turkish coffee, you'll still find it presented on a small tray, often with a delicate cup and saucer. The spoon, if provided, is generally there for stirring sugar, though traditionalists often take their coffee black. The emphasis is on the warmth of the hospitality, the quality of the brew, and the convivial atmosphere. A host will still insist on offering you a second cup, and it would be considered impolite to refuse outright without a valid reason. The subtle negotiation of more coffee, or I'm content, still happens, just through spoken words or simpler, more universal gestures, rather than intricate spoon placements. The very act of sitting down to share coffee remains a significant social ritual. It's an invitation to conversation, to connection, to a shared moment of calm amidst the day's rush. The focus has shifted from the microscopic details of spoon orientation to the macroscopic experience of human connection and generous hosting. The underlying philosophy, however, remains the same. Coffee is a bridge between people, and its consumption is an act worthy of respect and refinement. So, while the 14 spoon rules might be a delightful historical footnote, the essence of the polite Ottoman coffee ceremony continues to thrive, proving that some traditions, in their adapted forms, possess a timeless appeal. The journey of coffee and its elaborate etiquette, born in the Sufi lodges and perfected in the Ottoman courts, did not remain confined within the empire's borders. Its allure, its stimulating properties, and the captivating rituals surrounding its consumption were simply too potent to be contained. Imagine the stories carried by merchants, diplomats, and travellers, spreading across continents like the invigorating aroma of the brew itself. From the Ottoman Empire, coffee embarked on a grand tour, initiating a global love affair and influencing traditions far beyond its original homeland. The mainstream historical fact here is that Ottoman coffee culture played a pivotal role in the global spread of coffee, influencing brewing methods, social customs, and the establishment of coffee houses across Europe and beyond. While coffee beans themselves might have reached Europe via other routes, the Ottoman Empire popularized how coffee was consumed as a social beverage, setting a precedent for public coffee consumption that would be widely emulated. The very word coffee in many European languages, like café in French or café in German, is derived from the Ottoman Turkish kahve. The quirkier tidbit is how some of the earliest European coffee houses consciously mimicked the Ottoman style. When the first coffee house opened in Venice in the mid-17th century, or later in London and Paris, they were often designed to evoke an exotic Eastern feel, complete with cushions, low tables, and elaborate serving rituals that, while perhaps not replicating the 14-spoon rules, certainly borrowed from the general Ottoman emphasis on presentation and social interaction. Imagine a Venetian merchant, accustomed to the bustling atmosphere of the Grand Bazaar, trying to recreate a slice of that Ottoman charm in his own city, complete with strong, dark coffee served in small cups. It's like an early form of cultural fusion cuisine, but for beverages. Historians still argue whether coffee's global spread was primarily driven by its inherent stimulating properties, its novelty as an exotic luxury, or the compelling social model of the coffee house that the Ottomans had pioneered. Was it the drink itself, or the social context that proved most irresistible? What is clear is that the Ottoman contribution to global coffee culture was profound and multifaceted. European travellers returning from the Ottoman Empire brought back not just tales of distant lands, but also a taste for this intriguing new beverage. They described the coffee houses as vibrant centres of intellectual exchange, places where news was disseminated and ideas debated. This appealed greatly to burgeoning Enlightenment-era thought in Europe, where similar public spaces for discourse were beginning to emerge. Coffee, therefore, became intertwined with intellectualism and revolution in many European capitals. While the intricate spoon etiquette didn't fully translate, imagine trying to teach 14 nuanced signals to a rowdy London coffeehouse crowd, the fundamental concept of coffee as a social lubricant and a catalyst for conversation certainly did. The elegant presentation, the focus on hospitality, and the sheer delight of savouring a carefully prepared cup of coffee all carried Ottoman echoes. The world adopted the beverage, then adapted its rituals, proving that a good idea, much like a strong coffee, can certainly travel far and wide, leaving its aromatic imprint on every culture it touches. The silent language of the spoon might have stayed largely at home, but the spirit of refined coffee service spread its wings across the globe. The global journey of coffee, propelled by its Ottoman origins, found its most enduring legacy not just in the beverage itself, but in the very concept of the social space it fostered. Imagine a cold, damp morning in 17th century London, or a bustling square in 18th century Paris. Suddenly, a new kind of establishment appears, promising warmth, stimulation, and lively conversation. It is the coffee house, directly inspired by its Ottoman predecessors. This fundamental institution, born in the bustling streets of Istanbul, became a global phenomenon, reshaping urban landscapes and intellectual discourse across continents. The mainstream historical fact here is that the Ottoman coffee house served as the direct progenitor for the European and eventually global model of the public coffee house, establishing a new paradigm for secular social gathering and intellectual exchange. Before the Kahvehan, there wasn't a widespread, dedicated public space for casual, daily congregation that wasn't a tavern or a place of worship. The Ottomans invented this third place, a concept that remains vital in urban planning and social theory today. The quirkier tidbit is how these early European coffee houses quickly became known as penny universities in places like London, because for the price of a cup of coffee, one could sit, read newspapers, which were often provided, listen to debates, and engage with intellectuals of the day. Imagine a cacophony of voices, the scent of roasting beans mixing with pipe smoke, as philosophers, merchants, and writers passionately argued, shared news, and forged revolutionary ideas. It was the original information superhighway, powered by caffeine. It's like a combination of a library, a debate club, and a networking event, all for a single coin. Historians still argue whether the concept of the coffee house primarily spread due to a direct imitation of Ottoman cultural practices, or if it was an inevitable social evolution that simply found its perfect form in the coffee house, irrespective of its origins. Was it cultural appropriation, or a universal need finding its ultimate expression? What is clear is that the Ottoman model provided the template, demonstrating the power of a dedicated space for public discourse. From London and Paris, the coffee house concept migrated across Europe to Vienna, Amsterdam, and beyond, eventually making its way to the Americas. Each region adapted the concept to its own cultural context, but the core function remained: a place for connection, conversation, and the consumption of a stimulating beverage. These spaces nurtured revolutions, scientific discoveries, artistic movements, and economic deals. They facilitated the spread of literacy, as newspapers became readily available, and fostered a sense of public opinion. Even today, the echoes are undeniable. Your local Starbucks, that cozy independent cafe around the corner, or the bustling coffee shops in any major city, they all owe a debt to those early Ottoman Kahvehanila. The core idea of a public, accessible, and stimulating environment built around the shared experience of coffee is a direct descendant. While the 14-spoon rules may be a charming whisper from the past, the loud, vibrant legacy of the Ottoman coffee house as a social and intellectual hub continues to resonate globally, proving that some innovations are so profoundly useful they transcend time and culture. The cup may have simplified, but the gathering endures. As we near the end of our journey through the history of Ottoman coffee and its intricate etiquette, we arrive at a more universal truth, one that transcends empires and centuries, the enduring allure of ritual. Imagine yourself, right now, as you settle in with your own comforting evening beverage. Perhaps it's not Turkish coffee, but there's a certain way you hold the mug, a specific order you add cream or sugar, a favourite spot you choose to sit. These seemingly small habits are, in their essence, personal rituals. The complex spoon rules of the Ottomans, while archaic to us, tap into a fundamental human need, the desire for order, meaning, and connection in our daily lives. The mainstream historical fact here is that human societies throughout history have created and adhered to rituals, both grand and mundane, to imbue activities with meaning, establish social order, and foster a sense of community. The Ottoman coffee ceremony, with its meticulous rules and silent language, was a prime example of this universal human tendency. It wasn't just about getting a caffeine fix, it was about transforming a simple act into a performance, a shared experience that reinforced cultural values and social bonds. The quirkier tidbit is how often these rituals arise around everyday activities, precisely because they are so frequent. When something is done repeatedly, we instinctively seek ways to make it more intentional, more significant. Imagine the repetitive act of preparing and consuming coffee day after day, year after year. It's almost inevitable that specific customs would develop around it, turning the ordinary into the extraordinary. It's like when you have a specific routine for getting ready in the morning, or a particular way you like to wind down at night. These personal rituals, no matter how small, add structure and comfort to our lives. Historians still argue whether rituals like the 14 spoon rules primarily arise from a conscious desire to create social hierarchy, or if they emerge more organically from a collective human need for structure and shared understanding in a complex world. Was it top-down control or bottom-up comfort that birthed these intricate systems? What is certain is that they serve a profound psychological and social purpose. These rituals provide comfort in their predictability. They offer a sense of belonging as those who understand and participate in them become part of an exclusive yet inclusive group. They can even act as a form of non-verbal communication, as we've seen with the spoon rules, allowing for subtle interactions that preserve harmony and avoid direct confrontation. In a world that could often be chaotic and uncertain, the controlled environment of a coffee ceremony, governed by known rules, offered a quiet refuge. Even today, in our fast-paced digital world, the allure of ritual remains strong. We crave authenticity, connection, and a moment of intentionality. This is why craft coffee movements thrive, why we seek out artisanal tea, and why certain dining experiences become almost theatrical performances. We're not just consuming, we're participating in a ritual, often unconsciously, that connects us to something larger than ourselves, whether it's a historical tradition or a modern community. The Ottoman coffee ceremony, with its precise spoon placements, reminds us that the human desire to infuse meaning into the mundane, to elevate the everyday into an art form, is as timeless as the comforting aroma of a freshly brewed cup. We've journeyed together from the ancient Sufi lodges, where coffee first brought wakefulness, through the opulent Ottoman courts, where its rituals were perfected, to the global coffee houses that continue its legacy. We've explored the intricate silent language of the 14 spoon rules, a testament to a society's ingenious approach to politeness and communication. Now, as the evening draws to a close, let's reflect on the complete story of how coffee, from its humble origins, became a cultural cornerstone defined by such intricate etiquette, and what it leaves us with today. The mainstream historical fact that encapsulates this entire journey is that the evolution of coffee culture within the Ottoman Empire represents a profound instance of a simple commodity transforming into a complex social institution, deeply embedding itself into daily life through formalized rituals and shared practices. It wasn't merely about taste or stimulation. It was about the creation of a whole new dimension of human interaction, a quiet revolution in a cup. The quirkier tidbit to ponder as we wind down is how this level of detailed etiquette around a beverage is almost unimaginable in our fast-paced world. Imagine trying to implement 14 spoon rules in your average bustling coffee shop this morning. You'd likely cause more confusion than communication. This highlights just how much societies and their communication norms can shift over centuries. It's a charming, almost whimsical reminder of a time when patience, observation, and subtle grace were paramount in social interactions. It's like discovering a secret garden hidden in plain sight, full of forgotten beauty. Historians still argue whether the primary driver for such elaborate etiquette was the desire for heightened social distinction among the elite, or a more fundamental need for order and predictability in social gatherings in an era without our modern communication tools. Was it an exclusionary practice, or a unifying one, creating a shared language for those within the polite society? Perhaps it was both, evolving organically to serve multiple functions. From its role as a spiritual aid for dervishes, helping them stay awake for long nights of devotion, to its controversial status that once saw coffee houses banned, and finally to its embrace by sultans and its spread across the globe. Coffee's journey is a microcosm of cultural evolution. It shows us how something as seemingly simple as a drink can become intertwined with power, religion, social class, and even silent communication. The finjan, the zarf, the tray, and most fascinatingly, the small eloquent spoon, all played their part in this grand narrative. Though the precise 14 spoon rules may now be the stuff of history books and fascinating anecdotes, their spirit lives on. The care with which Turkish coffee is still prepared and served, the emphasis on offering hospitality, and the profound social significance of sharing a cup of coffee all carry the echoes of that intricate Ottoman past. It reminds us that rituals, even in their simplified forms, are essential to human connection, transforming mundane acts into moments of shared meaning. So, as you drift off, perhaps you'll envision a bustling Ottoman coffee house, the gentle clinking of tiny spoons, and the silent, knowing glances exchanged across delicate finjans. You might even imagine yourself subtly shifting your own imaginary spoon, a quiet participant in a language spoken only through the delicate tilt of metal, a language that, tonight, you've quietly mastered,